Something's here.
Welcome back, kindred spirits, to another obsessive alien video, and consider this one the second part of my previous full trailer breakdown. The thing is, it's easy to miss a lot of stuff, and then 3 more teasers dropped that showed us some very peculiar things. Therefore, I didn't get a chance to cover much of the new footage. So with no further ado, let me share with you some ideas I've had regarding a few of these perplexing shots and images.
Collision imminent.
To begin with, we see a violent collision with the Maginot vessel just before entering Earth's orbit. So far, the narrative presented by showrunner Noah Hawley remains unchanged. Weyland-Yutani deliberately sabotaged and sacrificed one of its own science and exploration vessels, which crash lands on Earth in Prodigy City. Although the exact sequence of events that transpired which led to the Maginot's catastrophic flight path remains unknown, judging from the amount of debris mainly stemming from the second structure here. A large part of the vessel's integrity and life support failure would have been primarily due to this fatal collision. I'm adamant that the android seen interfacing with Mother, who also appears to be the cryptic individual communicating with Prodigy synthetics, was responsible for this collision. In any case, it's hard to determine what this other construction is to the right here. Being so close to Earth, it could be an extensive maintenance or mineral hauler, a towing vessel, or even a storage facility that was implemented to reduce shuttle re-entry into Earth's atmosphere. But there may be another reality to this. What if we're looking at the very early stages, an initial phase or precursor to what would later become Gateway Station, Earth's primary orbital space station and transportation hub? Sure, the station was much closer to Earth and functioned within a geosynchronous orbit when we witnessed it ourselves 59 years later in 2179. But that's not to say it wasn't initially constructed further afield and had a more primitive function before becoming re-envisioned as an international hub for cargo, repairs, hospitalization, quarantine, border security, as well as accommodating residential quarters. Nice. The Weyland-Yutani report, written by Stephanie Danielle Perry, tells us that construction of the station may have begun as far back as the 2120s, which is the very decade Alien Earth begins. Also, examine the architecture of this potential precursor to Gateway closely. Notice how there is a downward spire jutting out from the upper module, which is very reminiscent of the modular superstructure seen in Aliens, particularly the design of its base components, which may have functioned as mass stabilizers and deep system sensors. In the third and latest teaser, it's possible to make out larger pieces of debris that could have formed one of the station's catwalks or maintenance shafts, which connected the modules together. Was the Weyland-owned Maginot craft deliberately ordered via its synthetic to partially collide with the station, providing a convenient alibi for the crash and its descent into a rival corporation's headquarters? Especially if the android had been preloaded via the console with a corruption subroutine, making it easier to attribute the disaster to a malfunction, rather than human intent. Now remember, this would not be the first time nor the last time the company shifted blame onto its hardware to avoid prosecution. The alternative is that the station is operating with some basic functionality as a biosecurity perimeter for Earth, and is currently under the authority of the Interstellar Commerce Commission as it was in 2179. If so, it most likely detected specimens on board the Maginot and used an advanced bioscans that would surely have ordered them to dock for inspection. In defiance of the prospect of losing precious cargo, Weyland-Yutani's primary orders to the ship's android may have encouraged an evasive maneuver, and in the process a collision occurred. Now, with no way of stabilizing the ship's vitals, the better course of action from Weyland-Yutani's perspective would surely be to designate an impact zone that could cripple the company's most formidable rival, Prodigy, while still using the corrupted android excuse as the only plausible cause for this disaster. My second theory zeroes in on a mystery that has us all baffled, still piecing together what this bizarre and gruesome contraption might be. It, in part, embodies the makeshift engineering of pieced-together components and hydraulics, in an effort to either produce something or sustain life. In my mind, it could be several things that fall under the same category. So let us first consider the possibility of ectogenesis, which is the process of growing a fetus outside of a living body in an artificial environment, essentially an artificial womb. What we see here could be, in essence, a biobag, nurturing an embryo into a, well, perhaps fetus isn't the right word here, as it only applies to mammals. However, if we're assuming it's a xenomorph, then we might call it a nymph or a chest burster. It's also worth mentioning that in Alien Romulus, the use of incubators to grow facehuggers was used aboard the Renaissance station in 2142. Whatever the horror developing inside this artificial environment may be, it appears evident that the hydraulic tubing and mechanisms attached to it are designed to support and nurture. The fluids entering the biobag may simulate the organism's natural version of amniotic fluids, nutrient delivery systems, oxygenization, and even waste removal. An artificial substitute for the complexities of gestation. Its computerized container provides a sealed environment, offering immune protection and regulating temperature, whilst measuring and displaying essential bioreadings to the scientists. Although the brief but intense explosion of glass and organic matter is a shocking surprise, if this theory is correct, it explains the sudden burst of gore as the development of this organism has likely reached a crucial stage, and with a host invading its immediate vicinity, instincts kick in. However, what makes this shot vastly more interesting to me is everything to do with the brilliance of what this show is trying to achieve by filling the universe with additional alien species that might be equally as terrifying as the perfect organism, although hopefully not equally as deadly. It's something I'd never fully considered to be a strong candidate for what the Alien franchise needs right now, but it is filling me with optimism. If we pause and zoom in, what can be seen here is unequivocally something that resembles an eyeball. In the trailer, there was a computer screen that described a creature logged as Species 64, also named T. ocellus. Its attributes are fierce enough for it to dislodge and replace the eye of a host, and then override neural pathways to the brain. The most logical explanation of what is transpiring in this scene is that the crew of the Maginot have long been intensely studying this peculiar invertebrate organism, comprised of tentacles and one large eye supporting multiple lenses. Whether this apparatus is indeed an artificial womb or merely an organic holding cell, in this particular moment its survival mechanisms have activated, and it launches an attack on Wendy, a synthetic who has received a dying child's consciousness. The aftermath of this encounter could be fascinating and ties directly to another concept of this show that I'm finding myself very excited about: the interactions and relationships between androids and aliens. There is undoubtedly enough evidence in some shots to suggest that the androids are not always hunted, probably because they are comprised of non-organic materials. But judging from this facial flinch from Wendy, I'd assume that the T. ocellus has initiated its primary function upon her. The creature's fleshy squeal is also highly audible, serving as evidence of this activity as she winces. Without veering too far into speculation, I can't help but wonder how this intruder will interact with the non-organic body of a synthetic, and whether its invasive mind-controlling abilities will have any effect on her underlying human consciousness. At the very least, Wendy may become a highly unpredictable protagonist, caught in an internal struggle with a parasitic organism. The combination of her adolescent mind and formidable physical capabilities could make the results of her actions volatile and even dangerous. What's more intriguing is the possibility of a rare symbiosis, a scenario in which the creature, unable to fully override its host as it usually would, instead forges a psychic link. Such a connection might grant both entities intimate awareness of each other's intentions and history, assuming of course that the parasite is intelligent enough to act with that level of conscious restraint. Nothing too far-fetched, but some form of deep connection between the two entities would add an interesting element to Wendy's story and the overall plot. And why not? The Alien films have always leaned into layered storytelling and hidden agendas, mixing corporate greed, body horror and twisted science into something truly unsettling. Suppose there is only one certainty I can say about the show right now. In that case, it is that I have high expectations for it to excel in exploring the plethora of predatory extraterrestrial life. I have a lot of faith that from all of the interactions and suspense of potentially dozens of these deadly life forms stored on the Maginot, all the way up to the outbreak on Earth, the display of horrific biodiversity is going to be a real show stealer. I'm intrigued by the corporation wars, and of course to see what kind of treatment the xenomorph will face this time around. But all of these new bedbugs are what has me the most hyped right now. So how do you feel about it? Thanks for watching, and I look forward to the comments section. Dude, signing off.